Freedom is an individual choice, and each one of us must assume the responsibility of fighting for it. The kind of human idolatry that induces us to follow others, and to expect ready-made answers from them is a remnant of our herd mentality. Whoever sincerely wants to penetrate the teachings of sorcerers does not need guides. It is sufficient to have a genuine interest, and guts of steel. He will, by himself, find everything he needs through an unbending intent. The true path consists of our determination to be impeccable. The important thing is that you acquire an initial degree of discipline so that you can undertake real exercises of sorcery later on. The purpose of sorcerers is a supreme enterprise, to take a human being out of his perceptual limitations, in order to restore to him the control of his senses, and enable him to enter a path of saving energy. Everything a warrior does should be imbued with an urgent sense of the practical. He should have an unbending focus on the real purpose of human beings, freedom. A warrior has no time to lose, because the challenge of awareness is total, and it demands maximum alertness 24 hours a day. For sorcerers, things like remote vision, knowledge of events before they happen, or journeying to parallel worlds are normal experiences in the execution of their tasks. However, as long as we are incapable of verifying them for ourselves, we will inevitably take them to be fantasies, or, at best, to be metaphors. This is the nature of sorcerer's knowledge, take it or leave it. You cannot reason it out, it is not possible to verify it intellectually. The only thing we can do with it is to put it into practice, exploring the extraordinary possibilities within our being. Nagualism is a body of practices and ideas. Modern man has been granted an incredible opportunity through the revelations of sorcerers and the complex maneuver of awareness to which seers devote themselves, the movement of the assemblage point, and thus access to a new level of awareness. Our destiny as ordinary men doesn't concern sorcerers at all. You should understand this once and for all. A warrior is made for combat. When he is at war, he is comfortable. Unlike the petty wars which we as humans constantly involve ourselves in because of social, religious, or economic reasons, the war of sorcerers is not directed against other people, but against their own weaknesses. By the same token, their peace is not the submissive condition to which modern man has been reduced, rather, it is an imperturbable state of internal silence and discipline. A warrior's goal continues to be that which inspired the spark of life that created him, access to a new level of awareness, the movement of the assemblage point. As we become socialized, human beings are tamed by the power of stimuli and punishments. We have been trained to live and die meekly, following unnatural codes of behavior which soften us and make us lose that initial impulse, until our spirit is hardly noticeable. By denying our basic tendencies, the society we live in eradicates the warring heritage that transforms us into magical beings. The only available way to change is to accept ourselves just as we are, and work from there. The warrior knows that he lives in a predatorial universe. He can never let his guard down. Wherever he looks, he sees an incessant fight, and he knows that it deserves his respect, because it is a fight to the death. We must always be moving, coming or going, supporting this or rejecting that, provoking tensions or discharging them in a burst, shouting our intent or remaining silent, doing something, being alive, and life thus reflects the ebb and flow of the universe. From the moment when the explosion which gave us origin occurred, until the moment of our death, we live within a flow. Those two episodes are unique because they prepare us for the encounter of what lies further ahead. And what aligns us to that flow? An incessant battle, which only a warrior will attempt. Because of that, he lives in profound harmony with everything. For a warrior, to be harmonious is to flow, not to stop in the middle of the current and try to make a space of artificial and impossible peace. He knows that he can only give the very best of himself under conditions of maximum tension. For that reason, he seeks out his opponent with avidity, with delight, knowing that the next step is decisive. His opponent is not his fellow man, but his own attachments and weaknesses, and his grand challenge is to compress the layers of his energy until they won't expand when his life ceases, so that his awareness does not die. Ask yourselves these questions: what am I doing with my life? Does it have a purpose? Is it tight enough? A warrior accepts his destiny, whatever it may be. However, he fights to change things, and he makes something exquisite of his passage on earth. He tempers his will in such a way that nothing can deviate him from his purpose. Sorcerers are free, they don't accept social obligations. The responsibility is to oneself, not to others. Do you know why you were given the power of perception? Have you discovered what purpose your life serves? Will you cancel your animal destiny? Those are sorcerers' questions, the only ones that can seriously change anything. A warrior knows that what gives sense to his life is the challenge of death, and death is a personal matter. It is a challenge for each one of us, and one which only sincere warriors accept. Seen from this point of view, the worries of ordinary people are just expressions of their egomania. We must not lose track of the fact that the commitment of a warrior is to pure understanding, a state of being that arises from internal silence, and not to the transience attachments of the modality of the era in which he happens to live. Our social concerns are a description which has been implanted in us. It does not stem from a natural development of our consciousness. Rather, it is a product of a collective mind, of emotional disarray, feelings of fear and guilt, of a desire to lead others or be led. Modern man does not fight his own battles. Instead, he enters into extraneous wars that have nothing to do with the spirit. Naturally, a sorcerer is not moved by this. I don't honor agreements made in my absence, I was not here when they decreed that I had to be an imbecile. If we are born into particularly difficult circumstances, we must have the courage to become something more than just a human reaction to those circumstances. In this world, there are only two kinds of people, those who have energy, and those who don't. We must live in a permanent fight against the blindness of our fellow men, while remaining impeccable, and not interfering with anybody. You like to explain your concern for people. But look at how you treat your body. Don't deceive yourself. If the human condition seriously interested you, you would not treat yourself like a pig. To feel pity for others is inappropriate for a warrior, because pity for others always stems from concern for the self. Perhaps you believe yourself better than others? The solidarity of sorcerers towards the people around them comes from a supreme command, not from human sentiment. I am mercilessly stalking your emotional reactions in order to lead you by the hand to the source of your preoccupations so that you will realize that your concern for people is a fraud. You are trying to escape from yourself by transferring your problems to others. Compassion, in the sense we use the word, is a mental illness, a psychosis that will just make us more and more powerfully entangled in our ego. Many say that compassion towards one's neighbor is the essential idea of all religions. Forget all that. Notions based on pity are a fraud. By the power of telling ourselves the same idea over and over, we have substituted a genuine interest in man's spirit with cheap sentimentality. We have become professionals at compassion. And so what? Has it changed anything? When you feel the collective mind putting its pressure on you, trying to convince you to concentrate on the appearances of the world, repeat this crushing truth to yourself: I am going to die, I am not important, nobody is, knowing that is the only thing that counts. Our misplaced effort is being caught in the mire. Our only way out is to act with coldness, try to relieve ourselves of our load and concentrate on the immediacy of our problem. We are beings who are going to die. We were programmed to live like beasts, carrying loads of costumes and others' beliefs until the very end, but we can change all that. The freedom which the warrior's way offers us is within the reach of your hand, take advantage of it. The tragedy of today's man is not his social condition, but the lack of will to change himself. It is very easy to design collective revolutions, but to genuinely change, to put an end to self-pity, to erase the ego, to abandon our habits and whims, that's something else entirely. Sorcerers say that true rebellion, and humanity's only way out as a species, is to stage a revolution against their own stupidity. As you can understand, this is solitary work. The goal of sorcerers is the sorcerer's revolution, the unrestricted unfolding of all our perceptual possibilities, a deadly somersault of thought to the unknown, the release from all ties. Fill your life with decisions of power, with strategies which will bring you to awareness. The order of the world doesn't have to be as we've been told, we can toss it aside anytime. We are not obliged to uphold an image before others, or live in an inventory that doesn't suit us. Our battlefield is the path of the warrior. People are so wrapped up in their everyday existence that they cannot even conceive the mystery that surrounds us. When we encounter something unknown, we automatically classify it in a comfortable category and then we forget it. Books are storage rooms of knowledge. One should surrender to knowledge, no matter in what form it is presented. The information we need in order to increase our awareness hides in places we rarely think of, and if we were not so rigid, everything in our surroundings would tell us incredible secrets. All we need to do is open ourselves to knowledge, and it will come rushing to us like an avalanche. You say you are perplexed by what I've called the war of the sorcerers against their own weaknesses. It is natural that the topic should affect you, since like all human beings you have been taught from birth to perceive the world in much the same way as a flock of sheep. My cohorts, after many years of tenaciously fighting their weaknesses, finally overcame this collective coercion. Be patient, and in due course things will become clear to you. I cannot guide you, but I can put you in front of an abyss which will test all your abilities. It depends on you, whether you hurl yourself off it to fly, or run to hide in the security of your routines. That abyss is your own dream. As a preamble to the subject of how to erase self-importance, I would state that the significant role we grant ourselves in everything we do, say, or think, constitutes a kind of cognitive dissonance, which clouds our senses and prevents us from seeing things clearly and objectively. We were born with everything necessary to fly, however, we are permanently forced to fly in tight circles around our own self. The chain that ties us down is self-importance. The path which transforms an ordinary human being into a warrior is very arduous. Our sensation of being at the center of everything, and the need to always have the last word, is forever getting in the way. We feel important. And when one is important, any intent to change is a slow, complicated and painful process. That feeling isolates us. If not for that feeling, we would all flow in the sea of awareness and we would know that the self doesn't exist for its own sake, its destiny is to feed the eagle, the indescribable force. The sense of importance grows in a child while he is perfecting his social comprehensions. We have been trained to construct a world of agreements that we can refer to, in order to communicate with each other. But this gift included an annoying attachment, our idea of me. The self is a mental construction, it came from outside, and it's time for us to get rid of it. All the mistakes that occur when we communicate are living proofs that the agreement we have received is completely artificial. After experimenting for millennia with situations that alter our ways of perceiving the world, the sorcerers of ancient Mexico discovered a portentous fact: we are not forced to live in a single reality, because the universe is constructed according to very fluid principles which can accommodate almost infinite forms, producing countless ranges of perception. Starting from this verification, they deduced that what human beings actually receive from outside is the ability to fix our attention in one of those ranges, in order to explore and recognize it. We mold ourselves to it and learn how to perceive it as something unique. That is how the idea that we live in an exclusive world arose, and the feeling of being an individual self was generated in consequence. There is no doubt that the description we have received is a valuable possession. It allows us to grow up as normal people, within a society that is melded to that rigidity. To achieve it, we had to learn how to skim, that is, how to make selective readings from the enormous volume of data that arrives to our senses. But once those readings are converted into reality, the rigidity of our attention works as an anchor, because it prevents us from becoming aware of our incredible possibilities. What limits human perception is timidity. To be able to manage the world that surrounds us, we have had to give up our perceptual gift, that is, the possibility of witnessing everything. We sacrifice the flight of awareness in exchange for the security of the known. We can live strong, audacious, healthy lives, we can be impeccable warriors, but we don't dare. Our heritage is a stable house where we can live, but we have transformed it into a fort for the defense of the self, or rather, into a jail, where we condemn our energy to weaken in lifelong imprisonment. Our best years, feelings, and forces are wasted in forever repairing and bolstering that house, because we have wound up identifying ourselves with it. In the process of becoming a social being, a growing child acquires a false conviction of his own importance, and what was a healthy feeling of self-preservation in the beginning, ends up transformed into a selfish clamor for attention. Of all the gifts we have received, self-importance is the cruelest. It converts a magical, vivid creature into a poor, arrogant, graceless devil. Feeling important forces us to do absurd things. Because of our self-importance, we are stuffed to the point of bitterness, envy, and frustration. We allow ourselves to be guided by feelings of complacency, and we escape from the task of knowing ourselves with pretexts like, "I can't be bothered," or, "How tiring." Behind all that, there is an anxiety which we try to silence with an internal dialogue more dense and less natural. Self-importance deforms human beings, transforming them into rigid shells. Confronted with them, a warrior doesn't know whether to laugh or to cry. The demon of self-importance does not only affect those who believe themselves to be masters. It is a general problem and in a homogeneous way contaminates absolutely everybody. One of the strongest ramparts of self-importance is the concern with one's personal appearance. As we grow up, we become so involved in the defense of the self that at some point we can no longer remember the day we stopped being authentic, and became actors instead. When an apprentice enters the world of sorcerers, his basic personality is already formed, and nothing can cancel it out. The only option left to him is to laugh at it all. But, although it is not our congenital condition, sorcerers can detect what type of importance we grant ourselves through their seeing, because the molding of our nature over the years produces permanent deformities in the energetic field that surrounds us. Self-importance feeds on the same kind of energy that lets us dream. Therefore, to lose it is the basic condition of Nagualism, because it liberates an energy surplus for our use, and also because, without that precaution, the warrior's path could turn us into aberrations. That is what has happened to many apprentices. They began well, saving their energy and developing their potential. But they didn't realize that, as they gained power, they were also nurturing a parasite within themselves. If we are going to give in to the pressures of the ego, it is preferable that we do it as ordinary men, because a sorcerer who considers himself important is the saddest thing there is. Keep in mind that self-importance is treacherous. It can be disguised behind a facade of almost impeccable humility, because it is not in a hurry. After an entire life of practicing, it only takes a minimum of negligence, a tiny mistake, and there it is again. Considering its nature, it is a benefactor's duty to attack the apprentice's self-importance until it explodes. He cannot feel pity. A warrior must learn to be humble in preparation for the arduous path ahead, or he won't have the smallest chance facing the darts of the unknown. A warrior never allows himself to reach the point of madness, because to die from an ego attack is the stupidest way to die. Self-importance is deadly, it stops the free flow of the energy, and that is fatal. It is responsible for our end as individuals, and one day may even finish us as a species. When a warrior learns how to toss it aside, his spirit unfolds, jubilant. Self-importance can be fought in various ways, but first of all it is necessary to know that it's there. So, above all, realize it. Self-importance kills. Remember that while you work, meditate about it. Maybe the moment in which its meaning penetrates your interior will arrive, and you decide to do something. To realize it is, by and of itself, a great help, because the fight against the self generates its own impetus. Ordinarily, self-importance feeds on our feelings, ranging from the desire to get along with people and be accepted by others, to arrogance and sarcasm. But its favorite area of action is pity, for oneself and for those who surround us. In order to stalk it, above all we have to deconstruct our emotions into their smallest particles, and detect the sources that nurture them. Feelings rarely present themselves in a pure form. They disguise themselves. To hunt them down we have to proceed very delicately and strategically, because they are quick and we cannot reason with them. We begin with the most obvious things, like, how seriously do I take myself? How attached am I? To what do I dedicate my time? These are things that we can begin to change, accumulating enough energy to liberate a little bit of attention that in turn will allow us to go deeper into the exercise. Instead of doing stupid stuff, we could dedicate a small part of that time to do physical exercises, to recapitulate our history, or walking barefoot on the grass. It seems simple, but with those practices our sensorial panorama changes. We recover something that was always there, which we had given up for lost. Starting from those small changes, we can analyze elements more difficult to detect, where our vanity is projected into insanity. For example, what are my convictions? Do I consider myself immortal? Am I special? Do I deserve to be noticed? This kind of analysis enters into the field of beliefs, the very core of our feelings, so you should undertake it through internal silence, and make a very fervent commitment to honesty. Otherwise, the mind will have its own way, and use all kinds of justifications. These exercises should be made with a sense of alarm, because it truly is about surviving a powerful attack. Realize that self-importance is an implacable poison. We have no time left, urgency is what we need. It is now or never. Once you have dissected your feelings, you should learn how to rechannel your efforts beyond human concerns, to the place of no pity. For seers, that place is an area in our luminosity, every bit as functional as the area of rationality. We can learn how to evaluate the world from a detached point of view, just as we learned, as children, to judge it from the point of view of reason. The only difference is that detachment as a focal point is much closer to the warrior's temper. Without that precaution of rechanneling our efforts to the place of no pity, the emotional turbulence stirred up with the exercise of stalking our self-importance can be so painful that we may turn to indulging in suicide or insanity. When the apprentice learns how to contemplate the world from the position of no pity, perceiving that behind all situations which imply an energetic drain there is an impersonal universe, he stops being just a knot of feelings and becomes a fluid being. The problem with compassion is that it forces us to see the world through self-indulgence. A warrior without compassion is a person who has located his will at the center of indifference, and he doesn't soothe himself by saying, "Poor me." He is an individual who feels no pity for his weaknesses, and he has learned to laugh at himself. A way to define self-importance is to understand it as the projection of our weaknesses through social interaction. We are important because we are afraid, and the more fear, the more ego. However, and fortunately for warriors, self-importance has a weak point. It depends on recognition to maintain itself. If we don't grant any importance to the importance, it's finished. Knowing this, an apprentice renovates his relationships. He learns how to escape those who confirm his self, and frequents those who don't care about anything human. He looks for criticism, not flattery, and annuls the suffocating persistence of his ego. He puts himself in situations where his authentic self is forced to take control. A power hunter doesn't have pity, he doesn't look for recognition in anybody else's eyes. The state of no pity is surprising. One attempts to reach it step by step, through years of continuous pressure, but it happens suddenly, like an instantaneous vibration that breaks our mold and allows us to look at the world with a serene smile. For the first time in many years, we feel free of the terrible weight of being ourselves, and we see the reality that surrounds us. Once there, we are not alone. An incredible push awaits us, help which comes from the core of the indescribable force and transports us in a microsecond to universes of sobriety and sanity. When we don't have any pity for ourselves, we can face the impact of our personal extinction with elegance. Death is the force that gives the warrior value and moderation. Only by looking through the eyes of death can we notice that we are not important. Then death comes to live by our side, and begin to tell us its secrets. The contact with death's unchangeable nature leaves an indelible mark on the character of the apprentice. He understands, once and for all, that all the energy of the universe is connected. There is no world of objects, related to each other through physical laws. What exists is a panorama of luminous emanations, inextricably bundled together, within which we can make interpretations as far as the power of our attention will allow. All our actions count because they release avalanches in the infinite. For that reason, none is worth more than any other, none is more important than any other. That vision destroys the tendency we have to be indulgent with ourselves. Witnessing this universal bond, the warrior is prey to contradictory feelings. On the one hand, indescribable joy and a supreme and impersonal reverence toward all that exist. On the other, a sense of the inevitable, and a deep sadness that has nothing to do with self-pity, a sadness that comes from the breast of infinity, a blast of solitude which will never leave him again. That purified feeling gives the warrior the sobriety, the subtlety, and the silence that he needs to venture there, where all human reasoning fails. Under such conditions, self-importance can't sustain itself. The universe in its great entirety is feminine, and of a predatory nature, and there is a tenacious battle of consciousness going on, where, as always, the strongest absorbs the weakest. On the cosmic scale, the strength of a being is not measured by its physical capability, but by its capacity to manipulate awareness. It follows that if we are to take the next evolutionary step, it must be done by means of discipline, determination, and strategy. Those are our weapons. Through their seeing, sorcerers witness that struggle, and they take their place in it, ready for the worst and without complaining about the result. For their ever-ready disposition for combat, they have won the title of warriors. A warrior considers the world we live in to be a great mystery, and he knows that the mystery is there to be revealed to those who deliberately look for it. That attitude of audacity will occasionally move the tentacles of the unknown, making the spirit manifest itself. The warrior's audacity is born out of the contact with his imminent death. If we're going to play, then let's play. But we play to the death. That is the sorcerer's feeling in front of his destiny. I bet my life on this intent, nothing less. I know that my end could be waiting for me anywhere, and there isn't anything I can do to avoid it. I will walk down my path with utmost concentration. I accept the responsibility of living fully. I will risk everything on a single hand. A warrior knows that no victory is guaranteed when faced with death. Even so, he freely enters into his battle, not because he believes he will win, but for the excitement of his war. For him, entering the war is already a victory. And while he fights, he is happy, because, for one who is already dead, every second of life is a gift. What makes it possible for the world to exist just as we see it, is our attention and that of all our fellow men, focused simultaneously and connected in a tight net of interpretations, reinforced by agreement. You see, the domain of attention is of supreme importance in the path of sorcerers, because it is the primary matter of creation. In all worlds, degrees of evolution are measured by the ability to realize, to be aware. In order to manipulate and understand the emanations which arrive to our senses, sorcerers develop the power of their attention, sharpening in through discipline to exquisite levels, which allow them to transcend human limitations and to fulfill all the possibilities of perception. Their concentration is so intense that they can penetrate the thick armor of appearances, and expose the essence of things. Seers call that degree of increased awareness, seeing. Even though such a fixed attention may seem like stubbornness, obsession, or fatalism, for the practitioner it's nothing but discipline. Don't confuse the discipline of sorcerers with people's repetitive routines. Discipline, as understood by a warrior, is creative, open, and produces freedom. It is the ability to face the unknown, transforming the feeling of knowing into reverent astonishment, of considering things that exceed the scope of our habits, and daring to face the only war that is worthwhile, the battle for awareness. It is the courage to accept the consequences of our actions, whatever they may be, without self-pity or feelings of blame. Having discipline is the key to handling attention, because it takes us to the will. And this allows us to modify the world until it becomes what we want it to be, and not like the one which was imposed on us from the outside. For this reason, will is the threshold of intent for warriors. Its power is so great that when it is focused on something, it can produce the most astonishing effects. Underlying each one of the prodigious actions of sorcerers, there is a whole life of discipline, sobriety, detachment, and analytical capability. Warriors place the highest value on these attributes, and together they constitute the state of being which they call impeccability. Impeccability doesn't have anything to do with an intellectual position, a belief, or anything like that. It is a consequence of saving energy. A warrior accepts with humility what he is, and he doesn't squander his power on lamenting because things are not otherwise. If his life is not satisfactory, the warrior is not offended, nor does he complain. On the contrary, he designs strategies to alter the course of his destiny. If we can learn how to curb our self-pity, and at the same time make room for the authentic me, we will become drivers of cosmic intent, and conduits for torrents of energy. In order to flow in such a way, we must learn to trust our resources and to understand that we were born with everything we need for the extravagant adventure which is our life. As a warrior, each person who has entered the path of sorcery knows that he is responsible for himself. He doesn't look aside, seeking approval, or trying to discharge his frustrations on others. What you are looking for is within yourself. You have to struggle to make your actions final, and to achieve your own clarity. Commit yourself before it's too late. The aspect of impeccability which particularly concerns our daily lives is knowing how exercising our freedom affects others, and avoiding the resulting friction at any cost. Occasionally, our relationships with others will generate friction and expectations. A fighting sorcerer pays close attention to his contacts, and becomes a hunter of signs. If there are no signs, he doesn't interact with people, he is content to wait because, although he doesn't have time, he has all the patience in the world. He knows that too much is at stake, and won't risk ruining everything by one false move. Since he is never desperate to achieve contact with anyone, the warrior can choose his affections with sobriety and detachment, taking care at all times that people he consents to be with are compatible with his energy. The secret to achieving such clarity of vision consists in identifying oneself and not identifying oneself. A sorcerer identifies himself with the abstract, and not with the world. And that allows him to be independent and take care of himself. Realize that, face to face with our destiny, each one of us is alone. So take control of your own life. A warrior polishes details, develops his imagination and puts his ingenuity to the test by resolving situations. It's inconceivable for him to feel destitute, because he has self-control and he doesn't need anything from anybody. By concentrating on details, he learns how to cultivate delicacy, subtlety, and elegance. The beauty of this struggle is shown in the invisible stitches. That is the sorcerer's trademark, the fulfillment of intent. The gift of independence and the control of details produce the capacity to persist where other people desist. When arriving at this point, the warrior is barely a step away from impeccable conduct. Impeccability is born of a delicate balance between our internal being and the forces of the external world. It is an achievement that requires effort, time, dedication, and being permanently attentive to the objective, so that the final purpose is never lost from sight. But, mainly, it requires persistence. Persistence defeats apathy. It is as simple as that. The threshold of magic is an intent sustained beyond what seems possible, desirable, or reasonable. It is a mental leap, to become tuned to the will of the indescribable forces emanations, and to allow their command to loosen the rigidity of our limits. But few are willing to pay the price, to walk the extra mile. On several occasions, I was about to abandon my teacher, oppressed by the magnitude of the task I was given. What saved me in the end, and gave me a second wind, was a wave of energy that the warrior finds within himself when everything seems lost. Many apprentices, after searching for years and not finding anything to satisfy their expectations, retire disappointed without knowing that maybe they were just a few steps from their goal. Once he has gained flexibility, humility, a sense of independence, control of details, and persistence, a warrior in search of impeccability knows that he has gained the power of his decisions. He is authorized to do or not to do, according to what suits him, and nobody can force him to do anything. It is at this point that he needs, more than ever, to be the owner of his emotions and of his mind, because clarity joined with power makes an explosive mixture. It can easily make a man reckless. The path of the warrior consists of saving energy. Everything that goes against that threatens his intent to be impeccable. But sometimes, because of the surplus of power which has accumulated in his luminosity, circumstances can take a particularly hard turn for him. If he hasn't learned to control his decisions appropriately, the result could be fatal. In the same way, there will be times when the apprentice forgets that his objective is not to nourish his ego, and he enters into situations which are stronger than him. Not only can this also be fatal, but it constitutes a serious breach of discipline that will plug him into the labyrinths of power. In these cases, power becomes his executioner. A warrior of knowledge does not senselessly surrender to the excitement of war. First he observes the conditions, gauges his possibilities, and establishes his support points. Then, depending on this evaluation, he will rush forth or retreat without the slightest hesitation. He does not deal his blows out blindly, but turns every step into an immaculate exercise of strategy. The warrior's final challenge is to balance all the attributes of his path. Once he does that, his purpose becomes inflexible. He is no longer moved by a desperate desire for gain. He is the owner of his will, and can put it to his personal service. When he arrives at that point, the warrior has learned how to be impeccable. And for him to continue being impeccable depends totally on the energy he has accumulated. Consider an apprentice who uses his recently won powers to become rich. He then comes to a forked road, either entering into the mindset of I want this, I want that, or to cultivate intent. If he chooses the first option, he has arrived at the end of his path, because no matter how much energy he dedicates to them, the yearnings of the ego are never really satisfied. In the second option, on the other hand, he has found his route to freedom. Intent is the tuning of our attention to cosmic awareness, which transforms our volition into a command of the indescribable force. We must be daring to attempt it deliberately, but once there, everything becomes possible. Intent allows sorcerers to live in a non-ordinary world, and to intend a destiny of freedom. For them, freedom is a fact, not just a utopia. By ignoring the principles of the warrior's way, modern man has wound up in a diabolical trap made up of societal affairs until his powers are drained and he becomes a useless object who sits meditating over his memories in a corner of the house. They told him that this is happiness, but he doesn't feel happy, he feels shackled. Be warriors, stop that. Realize your potential and free yourself from whatever. Don't impose limits on yourself. If you can defy the force of gravity and fly, that's great. And if you still have the impetus to challenge death and buy a ticket to eternity, that is tremendous. Take a risk. Get out of the trap of self-reflection and dare to perceive all that is humanly possible. A warrior seeks knowledge and makes an effort to be authentic, and he won't accept any compromises, because the object of his fight is total freedom. You have stored a lot of scientific and religious explanations on almost everything, which all have one common denominator, a great trust in the continuity of man. By helping you to see the universe with the eyes of a sorcerer, I am destroying this sensation in you. Death is an irrevocable reality. To avoid acknowledging it by applying second-hand beliefs is shameful. There are no expectations for the future. Sorcerers don't have a tomorrow. Not doing is an activity specially designed to banish any trace of everyday habits from our lives. Not doing is the favorite exercise of apprentices, because it introduces them to a marvelous environment and creates a very refreshing bewilderment for one's energy. The effect this has on one's awareness is called stopping the world. Not doing cannot be reasoned out. Any effort applied towards understanding it, is in fact an interpretation of the teaching, and goes automatically into the field of doing. The premise of sorcerers for dealing with this kind of practice is inner silence, and the quality of silence required for something so enormous as stopping the world can only come from direct contact with the great truth of our existence, that we are all going to die. If you want to know yourself, be aware of your personal death. It's not negotiable, it is the only thing that you can seriously own. Everything else may fail, but not death, you can take that as a fact. Learn how to use it to produce real effects in your lives. Also, stop believing in fairy tales. Nobody needs you out there. None of us is so important that it justifies inventing something as fantastic as immortality. A humble sorcerer knows that his destiny is the same as that of any other living being on earth. So, instead of having false hopes, he works concretely and with great effort to escape the human condition, and to reach the only exit we have, the breaking of our perceptual barrier. While you listen to death's advice, make yourself responsible for your life, for the totality of your actions. Explore yourself, recognize yourself, and live intensely, like sorcerers live. Intensity is the only thing that can save us from boredom. Once aligned with death, you will be able to take the next step, reducing your baggage to a minimum. This is a prison world, and we must leave it as fugitives. We can't take anything with us. Human beings are travelers by nature. To fly and to know other horizons is our destiny. Synthesize your life. Humanity in our time has acquired a strange habit that is symptomatic of the mental state we live in. We collect useless stuff. A sorcerer asks himself, what is the sense of all of this? Why invest my resources in something which won't help me at all? The appointment of a sorcerer is with the unknown. He cannot commit his energy with nonsense. While you walk the earth, collect something of true value from it, otherwise it wasn't worth it. The power that governs us granted us a choice. Either we spend life prowling around our familiar habits, or we encourage ourselves to get to know other worlds. The only thing which can give us the necessary jolt is the awareness of death. An ordinary person spends his whole existence without ever stopping to reflect, because he thinks that death is at the end of life. After all, we will always have time for it. But a warrior has discovered that this is not true. Death lives beside us, an arm's length away, permanently alert, looking at us, ready to jump at the smallest provocation. The warrior transforms his animal fear of extinction into an opportunity for joy, because he knows that all he has is this moment. Think as warriors, we are all going to die. Having the spirit of a warrior means seeing death as a privilege. That means to leave our mental habits behind. We are so accustomed to coexistence that, even face to face with death, we continue thinking in group terms. Religions don't tell us about the individual in contact with the absolute, but of flocks of sheep and goats who go to heaven or to hell according to their fortune. Even if we are atheists and don't believe that anything happens after death, that anything is generic, we assume it is the same for everybody. We cannot conceive of the idea that the power of an impeccable life can change things. In the view of such ignorance, it is normal for an ordinary man to feel panic regarding his end, and try to deal with it with prayers and medicines, or confuse himself with the noise of the world. Human beings have an egocentric and extremely simplistic vision of the universe. We never stop to consider our destiny as transitory beings. However, our obsession with the future betrays us. The sincerity or cynicism of our convictions makes no difference, because deep down we all know what is going to happen. It is that silent knowledge of death, which is behind the subconscious impulse. But there is one group of human beings who have been able to face that fear. As opposed to ordinary people, sorcerers eagerly seek out any situation that will take them beyond social interpretations. What better opportunity than their own extinction? Thanks to their frequent excursions into the unknown, they know that death is not natural, it is magical. Natural things are subject to laws, but death is not. To die is always a personal event, and for that sole reason, it is an act of power. Death is the gateway to infinity. A door made to the exact measure of each of us, which we will all pass through someday, returning to our origin. Our lack of understanding impels us to see it as a common reducer. But no, there is nothing common about it, everything about it is extraordinary. Its mere presence gives life power, and gives focus to the senses. Our existences are made up of habits. Already at birth, we are programmed as a species, and our parents are in charge of narrowing that programming even further as they guide us towards what society expects from us. But nobody can die as a routine, because death is magical. It lets you know that it is your inseparable advisor, and it tells you, be impeccable, your only option is to be impeccable. Sorcerers are not negative, they don't seek the end. But they know that what gives value to life is having an objective worth dying for. The future is unpredictable and inevitable. Someday you won't be here anymore. In an instant you will be gone. For the warrior and for an ordinary man, the urgency of living is the same, because neither knows when they will take the last step. For that reason we have to be attentive to death, it can jump at us from any corner. Death is not a game, it is reality. Without death, there would not be any power in what sorcerers do. It involves you personally, whether you want it or not. You can be so cynical that you discard other topics of these teachings, but you cannot make fun of your end, because it is beyond your power to decide, and it is implacable. Destiny's coach will take all of us, without distinction. But there are two kinds of travelers, warriors who can lead with the totality of themselves, because they have fine-tuned every detail of their lives, and ordinary people, with boring existences, without creativity, whose only hope is in the repetition of their stereotypes until the end, people whose end won't make any difference, whether this end happens today or in 30 years. We are all there, waiting on the platform of eternity, but not everyone knows it. Awareness of death is a great art. When a warrior has put an end to his routines, when he doesn't care anymore whether he has company or is alone, because he has heard the silent whisper of the spirit, then you can say that, truly, he has died. From that point on, even the simplest thing in life become extraordinary for him. For this, a sorcerer learns how to live again. He treats each moment as if it were the last one. He doesn't waste any effort on feeling dissatisfied, nor does he throw away his energy. He doesn't wait until he becomes old to ponder the mysteries of the world. He is ahead, he explores, and knows and marvels. If you want to make space for the unknown, you must be aware of your personal extinction. Accept your destiny as the unavoidable fact that it is. Purify that feeling, become responsible for the incredible event of being alive. Don't beg in the presence of death, it will not condescend to those who give in. Invoke it, aware that you came to this world to know it. Challenge it, even knowing that whatever we do, we don't have the smallest chance of conquering it. It is as gentle with the warrior as it is merciless with the ordinary man. As an exercise, make an inventory of your loved ones, of everybody who concerns you, and realize that they too will die. There is nothing macabre about death. What is macabre is that we cannot face it with deliberation. It is very simple, you will evoke your dear beings through their inevitable end. Don't think about how or when they will die. Simply make yourself aware that someday they won't be there anymore. When evoking them in this way, you won't harm them, on the contrary. You will be seeing them in the appropriate perspective. The focal point of death is prodigious, it restores the true values of life. The teachings of the tradition of seers to which we belong begin with the fact that the universe is dual. It is formed by two forces which the old seers symbolized by means of two snakes that are intertwined. But those forces have nothing to do with the dualities we call good and bad, God and devil, positive and negative, or any other kind of opposing pairs we can think of coherently. Rather, they constitute an inexplicable wave of energy which the Toltecs called the tonal and the Nagual. In an axiomatic way, they established that everything we can interpret or imagine in any way is the tonal, and the rest, which we cannot categorize, is the Nagual. To emphasize that they are not two antagonistic realities, but rather two complementary aspects of unique force, which they nicknamed the eagle, or the indescribable force, the seers compared the tonal and the Nagual with the two sides of our physical body, the right side and the left side. And they saw that, just as the basic configuration of organisms is almost totally structured from a bilateral symmetry, these are also the forms in which energy manifests itself in the cosmos, and with it the way we perceive. Life is formed when a portion of the free energy of infinity, which the old seers called the emanations of the indescribable force, is encapsulated by an external force, becoming a new individual being, aware of himself. And they saw that the perception of the world happens when something they called the assemblage point of perception comes into play. Although that center of selection is in operation in every living being in the universe, the deliberate awareness of oneself, on this earth, can only be achieved by human beings and a group of species lacking physical organization, whom the seers of antiquity called allies. Interaction between man and these beings is not only feasible, it is something that frequently happens in our dreams. Sorcerers cultivate it, since the consciousness of inorganic beings, which are older than us, is filled with something that we all covet, knowledge. Having taken on the work of investigating the modes of energy, the sages from Old Mexico were urged to describe to their contemporaries what they had discovered. In their effort to find the most appropriate terms, they said that all that exists is divided into light and dark, like day and night. And from there they derived every thinkable binary description. It is a command which reflects the great cosmic duality. Through their seeing, they discovered that the world of energy is made up of extensive areas of darkness, sprinkled with tiny points of light, and they perceived that the dark areas correspond to the feminine part of the energy, while bright areas correspond to the masculine. They arrived at the inevitable conclusion that the universe is almost in its entirety feminine, and that the bright energy, the masculine, is rare. By definition, they associated darkness with the left side, the Nagual, the unknown, and the feminine, and luminosity with the right side, the tonal, the known, and the masculine. Continuing their observations, they saw that the act of galactic creation happens when the cosmic darkness contracts itself, and from it arises an explosion of light, a spark that expands, giving origin to the order of time and space. The law of this order is that things always have an end, which again implies that the unique and perennial principle of the universe is the dark energy, feminine, creative, and eternal. Likewise, man is divided into the tonal, represented by his daytime vigil, and the Nagual, by his dreams at night. From these observations, the rest of the wisdom of the Naguals is derived. They teach that dreams are a doorway to power because, ultimately, what sustains us is the dark energy, to which we go periodically to be renewed. Consequently, they directed all their power towards perfecting the art of becoming conscious while in the state of dreaming. They called that special kind of attention, dreaming, and they used it to deliberately explore the dark energy and come into contact with the source of the universe. In that way, the initial observation of the wise Toltecs became a practical knowledge. The opinions that we form about everything transform our world into something more and more predictable, until the possibility of visiting other worlds becomes a fairy tale. For modern man, absolutely everything that exists is put into definite categories. We are labeling machines. We classify the world, and the world classifies us, and those classifications are inherited. The greatest example of that absurd propensity to classify us is what believers call original sin, the sin of Adam and Eve, which makes us all forever sinful and also makes us all behave as sinners. We have become perceptual jailers of each other. The chain of human thought is powerful. Even our deepest feelings are classified and ordered so that nothing can escape. One example is the way we alienate ourselves from the actual time we are living in order to mindlessly go around repeating stereotypes. We have a collection of preset days, holidays, birthdays, etc. They are like stakes we tie our life to so we won't get lost, and thus we walk the earth, revolving around our descriptions. The rigidity of human behavior is revealed in routines. Sorcerers affirm that as long as there is memory, there is awareness of being, since the current of thought is an injection of life. The idea that time moves in a straight line from past to future is completely primitive, something that goes against the experience of sorcerers and even of modern science. Due to that limited interpretation, most of humanity is kept prisoner in a tunnel of time, where their destiny becomes an infinite repetition of the same. The reality of our condition is that we are energetically blocked, due to what sorcerers call the collective fixation of the assemblage point. A remarkable consequence of that fixation is the way we specialize. When preparing for a profession, for example, instead of widening our scope, we usually end up becoming sedentary, boring individuals, without creativity and without motivation. In a few years, our life becomes tedious, but, far from taking responsibility and changing ourselves, we blame our circumstances. One of the most serious habits that shape our inventory is the habit of telling others everything we do, or stop doing. It is an important part of socialization. We want to generate an exclusive image of ourselves, but the image ends up molding itself to other people's expectations, and we become imitations of what we could be. Once they consider us as facts, we have to follow certain behavioral patterns, even when we are sick of them or even if we don't believe in them, because any intent to change puts us up against the wall. Most people feel empty when they don't have love or friends, because they have built their life on a superficial base of relationships and they don't have any time left to ponder their destiny. Sorcerers maintain that talking about ourselves makes us accessible and weak, while learning how to be quiet fills us with power. A principle of the path of knowledge is to turn your own life into something so unpredictable that not even you yourself know what's going to happen. After a time, mental walls that trap us become a little softer and they start to give in. That's when genuine opportunities for change appear and we can take control of our lives. If we were able to transcend interpretation and face pure perception without prejudice, the impression of a world of objects would vanish. In its place, we would witness energy as it flows in the universe. Under such conditions, the chain of other people's thoughts would no longer have the smallest effect on us and we would not feel obliged to be or to do anything. Then our senses would have no limits. That's seeing. The sorcerer's objective is to break the fixation of social interpretations, and to see energy directly. To see is a total perceptual experience. Seeing energy as it flows is an imperious need on the path of knowledge. Ultimately, all the effort of sorcerers is guided to that end. It is not enough for a warrior to know that the universe is energy, he has to verify it for himself. Seeing is a practical matter which has immediate consequences and far-reaching effects on our lives. The most dramatic of them is that sorcerers learn to see time as an objective dimension. Energy is distributed through the universe in layers. All conscious beings belong to one of these layers, and we can get tuned to the energy of other bands due to a phenomenon known as alignment of perception. At certain points, the layers cross, generating energy vortexes where particular phenomena take place, phenomena which are of the greatest importance to sorcerers who see. Conditions for alignment are favorable there, and it happens spontaneously. Seers talk about passageways, bridges, and barriers in space, where the coordinates of time are annulled and the traveler's awareness can penetrate into strange worlds. Inorganic beings from all corners of the universe take advantage of those points to cross the border to the Earth, and we can do the same. This sort of thing happens more frequently than we would believe. It is not to be reasoned out, it is to be experienced. Another shocking and very useful effect of seeing energy as it flows is that sorcerers perceive other people's feelings directly, like thermal waves discharged from our luminous mass, impelled by emotions. They even detect feelings that the person himself does not realize are there. It's as if they have infrared vision, which guides them where their fellow men can't see anything but an impenetrable darkness. This allows them to be on their guard regarding other people's behavior. For that reason, it is impossible to deceive a seer and it is extremely difficult to surprise him. However, the true value of seeing is that it helps us understand intent. Once we witness the totality of existence as levels of energy, we see that there is something else there, an ulterior purpose, certain rules of action which organize everything. Sorcerers identify that purpose as a supreme and impersonal will, and through inner silence they can tune themselves to it. Naturally, a man of knowledge with such a tool at his disposal will combine things in the most appropriate way for his energy. An abundant and serene energy is the mark of the sorcerer who sees. We are all born with the totality of our energy, but we have generally become a mess before we die for lack of an adequate culture of energy management. Whether we die as a warrior full of power, or dying destitute, is due to the way we treat our energy. The luminous field that surrounds us is like a gigantic ball of cotton candy, a densely interwoven cloud of fibers which emanate energy like a radiator. When two people enter into a relationship, what happens is an exchange of emanations. Our fibers of light interact, whether we want it or not, and without us realizing it. It is a law that energy flows from where there is more to where there is less. As we spend life in constant interaction, the normal outcome is that, at the end, we are a little of ourselves and much of what the other one's left in us. However, warriors learn how to break the law of energy exchange by means of exercises like the recapitulation, whose purpose is to recover energy. In that way, they become self-sufficient, they recover their capital and deliberately return all their loans. Since there is no more waste, we can say that their luminous eggs are thermal. Warriors seek the company of those who will help them grow. In the realm of energy we are sealed units, our energy gathered at the moment we were conceived. Everything that comes later, the waste and the compromises, or the path of saving and recovering energy, are manipulations within those limits. Relationships between human beings are usually routine acts. The effect of all routines is to dissipate energy. Since we cannot change our inheritance, it is a matter of sanity to learn to economize our resources. Our cosmic destiny is to expand our awareness. For that reason, we were endowed with a portion of the creative power of the indescribable force. How difficult it is to give, without expecting anything in return. What characterizes sorcerers is they are free. They proceed every moment according to what power indicates to them. To have that vision, they cultivate sobriety. In general, the new seers opt for a position of self-sufficiency, because they are very greedy with their energy and they prefer to dedicate it to the expansion of their awareness. They have witnessed worlds on their journeys into infinity that make all other things seem pale and without attraction. What sorcerers demand is something very simple: responsibility. We have received life as a cosmic gift, and it is our privilege to reflect that gesture with total detachment. Thanks to his indifference, the warrior is in the position of turning his love into a blank check, unconditional, and abstract affection, because it does not start from desire. What a marvelous thing! Contrary to what a man in the street thinks, the nature of sorcerers is telluric, passionate. But the object of their passion is no longer carnal. They have seen the glue that ties all things together, a wave of passion that floods the universe and cannot be stopped, because, should that happen, everything would be reduced to nothing. Through their seeing, they have established their base on the cornerstone of awareness, the most powerful state of individual attention. Their love is an overpowering reality that vibrates in every breath, is expressed in every gesture, and given meaning in every word. It is a force which impels them to explore, to take risks, and to evolve, constantly bringing out the best of themselves. Sorcerers have discovered the most refined form of love, because they love themselves. They know that all we give out is a reflection of what we have inside. They have put the power of passion to the service of being, and it gives them the necessary impulse to undertake the only quest that counts, the quest for oneself. Recapitulation is the exercise to which sorcerers dedicate most of their time. In spite of the energy drainage we are subjected to through social interaction, we all have an option, because the sealed nature of our luminous configuration allows us to restart from zero any time, and to recover our totality. It is never too late. While we are alive, there is always a way of conquering any kind of blockage. The best way to recover the luminous fibers we have lost is by calling our energy back. The most important part is to take the first step. For those who are interested in saving and recovering their energy, the only way open to us is the recapitulation. A sorcerer knows that if we don't go for our ghosts, they will come for us. For that reason he leaves nothing unresolved. He recounts his past, looks for the magical joint, the exact moment when he was involved in somebody's destiny, and applies all his concentration to that point, and unties the knots of intent. Sorcerers say that we live our life from a distance, as if it were a memory. We spend life hooked, hurt by something that happened 30 years ago and carrying a burden that doesn't make any sense anymore. I don't forgive it, we scream, but it is not true, it is ourselves we don't forgive. The emotional commitments we make with people are like investments we have made along the way. We must be completely insane to leave our heritage thrown away like that. The only way we can become complete again, is by picking up that investment, reconciling ourselves with our energy, and dissipating the heavy burden of feelings. The best method the sorcerers have discovered for this is to remember the events of our personal history until we have completely digested them. Recapitulation takes you out of the past, and inserts you into the now. We cannot escape having invested much of our luminosity in relationships. But we can recapitulate, it cancels out the energetic effects of that investment. Fortunately, in the realm of energy, things like time and space don't exist. So it is possible to return to the place and to the same moment when the events happened, and relive them. It is not very difficult, since we all know well where we are hurting. To recapitulate is to stalk our routines, subjecting them to a systematic and merciless scrutiny. It is an activity that allows us to visualize our life as a totality, and not just as a succession of moments. However, and although this may seem strange, only sorcerers recapitulate as an exercise, other people only happen to do it by chance. Recapitulation is the heritage of the old seers, the basic practice, the essence of sorcery. Without it, there is no path. Watch out for a kind of luminous stagnation, a fixation of our attention that blocks the flow of energy. This happens when we refuse to face facts and try to protect ourselves by hiding behind evasive actions. Also, when we leave pending matters unresolved, or make commitments that tie us down. The consequence of that kind of stagnation is that we cease to be ourselves. When being pressured by the chain of decisions that we have made during our life, we can no longer act in a deliberate manner and we become entangled in the circumstances. This situation can escalate to the point of mental or physical illness, and can only be resolved through recapitulation. In essence, to recapitulate consists of making a list of wounds caused by our interactions. The next step is to travel back to the moment when the events took place, in order to reabsorb what belongs to us, and return what belongs to others. The warrior begins rewinding his day. He reconstructs conversations, deciphers meanings, remembers faces and names, looks for shades and insinuations, dissects his own emotional reactions and those of others. He doesn't leave anything to chance, grabs the memories of the day one by one and cleans them through his breathing. He also examines entire chapters and categories of his life. For example, partners he has had, houses he has lived in, schools, workplaces, friends and enemies, fights and happy moments, and so on. The ideal thing is to attack the task in chronological order, from the most recent memory until the most distant that it is possible to evoke. But in the beginning it is easier to do it by topics. A very profitable form of the exercise, accessible to all of us, is the fortuitous recapitulation. If you think about it, we are constantly recapitulating. All memories which conform to our internal dialogue can be called that. However, we evoke them in an involuntary way. Instead of stalking them in silence, we judge them and interact with them viscerally. That is pitiful. A warrior takes advantage of the opportunity, because those memories seemingly random, are warnings from our silent side. To recapitulate, no special conditions are necessary. We can try the exercise any time, any place, wherever we feel moved to do it. Warriors recapitulate when they are walking down the road, in the bathroom, when working or when eating, whenever it is possible. The important thing is to do it. It takes no definite posture. The only requirement is to be comfortable, so the physical body doesn't demand attention or interfere with the memories. However, sorcerers take the exercise very seriously. A good practice is to recapitulate sitting on the bed, in darkness, before lying down to sleep. Any means that isolates us from the environment is good for formal recapitulation. Once we have located an event and recreated each of its part, we have to inhale to recover the energy that we left behind and exhale fibers that others deposited in us. Breathing is magical, because it is a function that gives life. This kind of breathing should be accompanied by a lateral movement of the head, which sorcerers call to fan the event. It is energy work, there is no fixed pattern. What counts is the intent. Breathe in when you try to recover something, and blow back all that doesn't belong to you. If you do that with the totality of your history, you will stop living entangled in a chain of memories and instead, you will be focused in the present. Seers describe that effect as facing facts as they are, or seeing time objectively. Memories will find their own course, and luminosity is reordered by itself through the breathing. Just try it, make yourself available, the spirit will tell you how to do it. Recapitulation starts from inside and sustains itself. It is a matter of silencing the mind, and our energy body will take control, doing what is a delight for it to do. You feel well, comforted, far from draining you, it gives you rest. Your body perceives it as an inexplicable energy bath. But you should have the correct attitude. Don't confuse the exercise with a psychological question. If what you need is interpretations, go to the psychiatrist. He will tell you what to do to continue being the idiot that you are. Neither should you try to find a lesson. Stories with a moral only exist in children's books. Recapitulation is a specialized form of stalking, and should be undertaken with a high sense of strategy. It is about understanding and putting our existence in order, seeing it as it is, without remorse, reproaches, or congratulations, with total indifference and a spirit of fluidity, even of humor, because nothing in our history is more important than anything else, and all relationships, in the end, are ephemeral. The important thing is to begin, because the energy we recover from the first intent will give us the power to continue recapitulating more and more intricate aspects of our lives. First, it is necessary to go for the strongest investments, which are the most harrowing feelings. Then we go for those memories that are buried so deeply that though we had forgotten them, but they are there. In the beginning, recapitulating can be hard work, because our mind is not accustomed to that discipline, but, after closing the most painful wounds, energy will recognize itself and we become addicted to the exercise. In that way, each particle of light, which we recover, helps us to gain more. The moment you begin to prepare to voluntarily unravel the plots of our personal history, you will be taking a decisive step. Recapitulation doesn't have an end, it should last until the end of our days and beyond. I stretch my fibers every night while remembering what happened during the day. This way, my list of events stays updated. But just because it's a daily practice, we must not see the exercise as a routine. If we don't recover the totality of our energy, we will never achieve the power of our decisions. There will always be a background noise, a foreign command. And without the power of his decisions, a man is nothing. Reliving events is ideal, because it cleans the wounds of the past and clears up any congestion of the energy conduits. In this way, you break the fixation of others' people gaze, you expose the patterns of people's behavior, and nothing can hook you again. You become a sovereign being, you decide what you want to make of yourself. The effect of recapitulation on awareness is that it stops our internal dialogue. When a warrior is able to stop his dialogue, he tightens the relationship with his energy. It liberates him from the obligation of memory, and from the burden of feelings, and leaves a residual energy that he can invest in enlarging the frontiers of his perception. A warrior begins to appreciate the real thing, not the interpretation of it. For the first time, he comes into contact with the consensus of sorcerers, which is the description of a reality inconceivably integrated. It's normal that a warrior at this stage begins to laugh at anything, because energy provides happiness. Thanks to his recapitulation, he is happy, overflowing, jumping like a child. On the other hand, he begins to become a fearsome person, since, having his luminosity intact and his life clean, decisions will no longer be an obstacle for him. He will decide what is necessary the moment he wants to, and that, to other people, is scary. This is also the time when the warrior requires an extra dose of sobriety and sanity, because without it he would take unnecessary risks, endangering both his own security and the security of others. Another effect of recapitulation is that it works as an invitation to the spirit, and makes it want to come and live with us. In other words, to remember our past is the most effective method to unite the physical body and the energy body, which have been separated for years. A sorcerer who has managed to compress the thickest part of his energy is in a state where he may intend a feat of perceptual prowess, intending a copy of his life experience, in order to deceive death. That is the final objective of recapitulation, to create a double, and get ready to leave. You don't have to be a sorcerer to understand the importance of all this. To die in debt is a pitiful way of dying. On the other hand, to have a double to offer the indescribable force guarantees that you will be able to continue ahead. The fight of sorcerers is heroic. Recapitulating impeccably the content of their lives, they pick up the fibers which drained their attention, and return to those they have known all the attention they have given them. In that way, they arrive at a state of balance which allows them to leave with all their awareness. Their memories, coherent, refined, and integrated, work as an independent being, which serves as a ticket they hand over in exchange for their awareness. The indescribable force accepts that effort as a payment, and steps aside. Our replica is sufficient to satisfy its demand. Seers see that moment as an explosion of energy which aligns their encapsulated awareness with the totality of emanations out there, and their assemblage point expands infinitely, like a vortex of light. One of the tasks of sorcerers is to constantly analyze the insinuations of the spirit. For this purpose, they often use a book of memorable events, a map of those occasions when the spirit intervened in their lives, forcing them to make decisions, voluntarily or involuntarily. The advantage of this technique is that when we write, we detach ourselves from things and events, at least to a minimal extent, and thus we are able to focus on them with more objectivity. It is not about describing our daily routines, but of being attentive to the strange moments in which intent is manifested. Those are magical junctures, because they produce changes and they put us face to face with the meaning of our existence. Although signs of the spirit are a personal matter, there are ordinary events that in general mark people's life, like being born, choosing a career, intertwining your destiny with another person, or having children. Also illnesses and serious accidents, because they establish a nexus with death. For those who have the fortune of finding a conduit of spirit in the shape of a Nagual, this is, certainly, the most memorable event of all. The interventions of intent are precursors, very significant memories for a warrior, and they can be used as reference points of where to start when one is exploring episodes of personal history. It requires speed and clarity to select them and to synthesize them, extracting the personal stuff and leaving the magical essence. When properly done, they become what the new seers call abstract centers of perception, a matrix of intent, which a warrior has the duty of deciphering.